rates are dropping across various states in India, and this raises a very important and disturbing question about the future of the country's demographic balance. Many state governments are coming up with free IVF facilities, and some governments have introduced cash incentives for larger families. So, what really contributes the decline in birth rate in many states in India? Let's talk to expert Ms. Sangamitra Acharya, who's a professor with the Center of Social Medicine and Community Health with Jawaharlal Nehru University, to gain more clarity on this issue. Hello, ma'am. Welcome to the show. Ma'am, several developed states in India, such as Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Telangana, Goa, many states have started offering free IVF treatment. So while recently Andhra Pradesh came up with cash incentive for the third child. So do you think these measures would really help? Would really increase the birth rate, or these are just symbolic? These projects are symbolic.
Thank you, Priscilla, for posing this question. All this while, if you look at our population policy, we've been worried about the increasing, numbers, increasing rates, and we've reached this spot where we've started to be concerned about how do we, take care of the declines that we have achieved, quote unquote, because of the incentivization, because of the efforts with the state put for reducing the fertility. Uh, as you put it, should these incentives be good enough to make any difference? I am a little skeptical on that, because if we go back to to what happened in terms of decreasing it, it took a lot of time to reach the levels that we are, to get down to the decreasing fertility rates. To my mind, it'll be something of a similar nature if we want to kind of now incentivize people to increase fertility, particularly by, let's say, subsidizing IVF, etc. Because if you really go by the infertility of, let's say, the couples who are infertile, is a fairly lesser share than of the whole population, which is in the reproductive ages, right? So that incentive will actually be for that target population, and therefore it may not be able to bring about the desired change in increasing the fertility. The second point I want to make in this context is this is a very, very behavioral aspect. Right. So it's not that you will want me to change my behavior over the period of time, as in when you would wish me to, by incentives or by, bringing on stringent, disincentives, etc., etc. These are what I have made as a choice for myself, given the, let's say, the processes of urbanization, given the pressures that I have for career making, pressures that I have in my roles via, let's say, the disaggregated gender roles. So I think those are some of the issues that we need to address before we can think about how fertility levels can be lowered. Later years of, getting married now, a lot of choices that youngsters are making in terms of remaining unmarried, right? So these are more of the behavioral. And in addition to that, I think it also matters in terms of how do we see the cost of education, housing. A lot of movement is happening towards urban areas, absorption within urban areas by way of
So
employment,
we
by
cannot
way.
we cannot point out one or two reasons. It's a couple of, it's so many factors combining, and all these things contribute to the choice that the young couples or couples who want to have children.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes, yes. Ma'am, I would like you to explain about the aspect in the other countries, like, in many developed countries like Japan, South Korea, in some European nations also, they have spent heavily on cash incentives, childcare support, fertility treatments, to boost birth rate. Which
Absolutely.
international example will suit the Indian situation, will be little relevant to the situation which we face in India now?
Absolutely. I think it's important to learn lessons from cross countries for the simple reason that there is a range of countries. Some of us are pronatalists, some of us are antinatalists. So if we go by, for example, countries like France, Germany, who have had, always incentivized, number of higher fertilities. Now, for having to be able to do that and materialize that, I think it's very important to ensure the child care regimes. Is childcare affordable? If childcare is affordable, if there are incentives for me to make my begin my family building process, say for example, paid parental leave, paid maternal leave, paid paternal leave, uh, then perhaps countries like France and Germany have been able to motivate, and they've still not been able to reach the targets that they have set for themselves. Nevertheless, it may be able to make some difference for us if the affordability in terms of raising children becomes something as a part of the policy. Supporting working mothers. We always, eulogize how women place themselves in terms of their multifaceted roles. Super women. You're doing everything as a mother, as a worker, as a family member, etc. But the support system, both in the institutions where women could be employed, and we know a lot of women are employed in informal sector. If we are able to devise something of a support, probably it will incentivize. Uh, because, and I'm saying this very consciously, because countries who have managed to bring positive change, say for example Nordic countries, they have very strong, gender parities are far better among them. They have recognized the flexibility of working hours if motherhood has happened to a woman. uh, there is the very liberal attitude towards leave for paternity and maternity. Public services for child health and maternal health and health in general are far better than what we are aspiring to do. So if we have to learn lessons from countries outside our borders, we may have to take on board something to this effect. Japan, despite having invested so much of it, so much of their share of GDP in towards fertility increase, long working hours that they have kind of engaged with. Housing, for example, has been always a problem in Japan. I think that has, and of course, being an Oriental country, the gender divide in terms of division of labor probably has not been able to give the results with the state incentives of increasing fertility have come in. And I think
Ma'am,
similar,
I want you to
yeah,
explain on how far we have progressed as a country,
okay,
how far we have progressed in giving paternal leaves, maternal
okay.
leave. How
Hmm.
do we, in many institutions,
Yes, yes,
workplaces,
yeah.
do they still
You know, I,
think
yeah.
providing paternal leave
Hmm.
is affecting the work, affecting the cost to the company? Do you think those
Absolutely.
questions are still being asked, because you have
Yes.
done many research into this of
Hmm.
the fertility rates and how the gender roles work? So can you please explain on that aspect, ma'am?
Yeah, thanks. I think this is a very important point to take on board when we are discussing this. And I'll bring you back to Dr. Ambedkar's efforts in making maternity leave an actualization. Way back in 40s when he was with the Labour Commission during British period, the study on mica mine workers was undertaken to figure out what's happening to their health and their working conditions. And that's where it was the study findings kind of helped us to understand that the health condition was largely dependent on what they were engaging in terms of work, respiratory problems, skin diseases, etc., etc. And based on the findings, it was stipulated that women workers will not go inside the dikes. They will have a leave for maternity. They will have leave on, the working hours were set in place. Off day was set in place. Water availability, food, etc., etc., was put in place. So that maternity leave, which was envisioned then and actualized, comes down to this date wherein the earlier shorter duration of maternity leave has now increased to almost 6 months of maternity in addition to paternity leave. But then this is all in the formal sector. We are not talking about the informal sector where there are very, very wide variations. As a private sector employer, my discretion is what decides how much of the leave will you get it. And that's perhaps where the pointer is, where we need to learn from the countries outside, where
And
you
and
some
Professor, we live in a and Professor, we live in a country where the unorganized sector contributes much more to the employment, and a big chunk of people work in various unorganized sectors.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, keeping that in mind, I think it becomes very important that we rope in the private sector, the informal sector, in, in a manner such that they're convinced to agree to what state is desirable of in terms increasing the fertility. If we have to increase the fertility levels, the private sector, the informal sector particularly, will have to come on board hand in hand with the state to be able to provide these kind of conditions which are conducive for the woman who decides to work.
Yeah, Professor, I want you to give us more perspective into the decline of birth rates in the southern states. In the early 80s, southern states implemented the family planning program with with a lot of efforts, and V2, ours two, and V2, ours one. All those things were implemented with big interest. But now
Yes,
those southern states are complaining because of the decline in the birth rate. They are affected when it comes to delimitation.
absolutely.
The number of Lok Sabha, the number of
Yes,
seats being given, all that. So they are, they say they scored in the family planning campaigns, but in the legislation as such, the numbers are falling and they are failing in that. So,
yes.
what do you think has contributed? What are the major factors that are most responsible for the decline in the southern Indian states? Apart from this factor of continuous campaigning on family planning programs, do you think are there any other factors also worked on with this?
Yeah, certainly. Had it been only campaigns, it probably would have worked equally well in the northern states as well. But then northern states, we know it didn't work, and like you said very rightly, having adhered to what the campaign kind of wished you to do, you are now almost being penalized for having adhered to what the fertility trends were requiring of you, and the northern states seem to be benefiting out of it. Nevertheless, I think the competition should not be from that perspective, because when we say limited family size, or what should be an ideal family size, one is if I may sound a little rude. Should the state be the factor deciding for my personal decision for making what will be the family size? State should not be the agency to decide for me. But then since we are part of the state as a system, certain kind of adherence is what is expected out of us. And therefore, I think when we make a comparison between the northern and the southern states, the disparity that we see in literacy in general, and
Okay.
particularly and female literacy for that matter, a lot of weightage has been given on female literacy, particularly in the realm of fertility. But I think even male literacy is equally important, because decision making is, especially in context of fertility, does not remain in the hands of the woman per se. So if the men folk are equally educated about, let's say, the family size which is desirable, and I'm consciously not saying small family size, how do we, that's where perhaps I want to say it's not, it also then doesn't remain only the women's responsibility. It has to be the couple's responsibility to decide on what is going to be their family size, what will be the composition of the family. So I think that becomes very important. The related
Okay.
issue, perhaps, that I think of is uh, the moment we think in terms of educational attainment, female educational levels being higher, you are also pushing the age at marriage upwards, right? So the moment age at marriage is pushed upwards, the fertility, the span through which fertility may be happening gets shrunk. The second point perhaps is also, which has an angle where a lot of socio familial context comes in. How much of conversation do we have on contraception, for example? How much of ease do we have in terms of talking about childbearing or using a contraception? Very, very, we mostly have a very, very moralistic stand in terms of contraception. You should not be informing girls about it because they will become immoral, etc., etc., the kind of narratives which we often get to hear. And we know that with increasing levels of education, which increasing gamut of information that youngsters have, this does not hold any waters. So information is important in order to help the young couple, or people who are in this age group, to be able to make those decisions. So a very strong distinction that I see across the southern and the northern states. One for sure is the educational realm. The other, and I think you mentioned in the beginning also, in terms of urban processes, right? The levels of urbanization that we see in southern states, particularly in the metropolitan cities, as compared to the northern states, barring, let's say, Delhi, for example, if you're talking about north as a one entity, that perhaps has another realm in terms of how are we seeing the housing market, availability of housing units, and therefore the influx of population into the cities. What are the propensities that these individuals will have in terms of accommodating themselves in an entity that could be a family, which will allow family building processes. So the delay in engaging with marriage and family building process gets delayed by, because I'm not getting a house to live in a metropolitan city which is conducive to for myself, for example. So I think that's something which is coming to my mind almost immediately. And then we can also relate it to, let's say, the cost of educating the children, particularly in terms of private versus public sector education that we are getting, irrespective of the quality of education which private sector schools could be imparting. The moment it's labeled as private sector, you're made to believe that it is supposed to be better. English medium private sector is what becomes the hype in being able to educate oneself, as compared to the let's say the vernacular schooling. So that is another element that I would think becomes important, in delaying the not only the childbearing, but to begin with the marriage itself, since we
Professor,
are.
Professor, I want to step in here. When you explain that the female literacy, the awareness, the taking decision related to having children, all that, all these things, I think we can place it on one side. The other one, from these developed states, the state governments are coming up with projects to fund fertility programs. For
Yes.
example, Andhra Pradesh government says the family will receive 40,000 rupees for the third child. For
Yes.
they say, you know, they will give a package. Eligible couples will receive 30,000 for having a third child and 40,000 for having the fourth child. Do you think
Yes.
these cash incentives will be attractive, will push those women, will push those, you know, probably we can say awakened couples to have
Yes.
more children? How come the state governments, do you think they are a bit clueless about how to make the cupids work, or they are very having a short vision?
I think they are equating the fertility behavior to the voting behavior. You know, when you have to vote, I think 10,000 rupees might work. But to make
Yes.
another baby, 30,000 or 40,000 will not work. What will work to my mind is if you can put in place the ways I can educate my child. If you can give me a housing where I can begin my family building process, where you can ensure that I will get some kind of employment when I'm leaving my rural spaces and entering the urban spaces. So I think laying down that infrastructure where I can ensure my child will grow to become a good human being with the propensity to be employed well, educated well, and employed well, I think that's going to incentivize me for having more children rather than 30 rupees or 40 rupees. Sorry, I don't think that's going to work. That's why I said it's not, please don't equate it with the voting behavior, because that's very different than the fertility behavior.
Right,
That's
right.
my take on this.
Right. Professor, some studies argue that, you know, the once the fertility falls, the rate falls, it's
Yes,
really tough to increase it, and
yes,
it becomes very difficult to reverse. So, is
yes.
there any evidence in any other countries where the fertility rates, you know, had improved, or how it was reversed? Can we get some learnings on that?
Yeah. I think historically it is kind of proven that it's very difficult to reverse the fertility decline. Nevertheless, when we take a call on some of the Nordic countries, France and Germany, there has been slight upward trends which are visible post these incentivization, that you are giving more leave to the mother and the father, you're giving certain benefits vis-a-vis employment, also housing, etc. Very minimal decline which is visible in terms of the upward trends. So and the long period of this increase is much longer than perhaps even the period of declining trends, when the declining trends set in. So I wouldn't say that it's impossible, but if at all it is possible, it's going to take much longer time. Like I said, it's a behavioral aspect wherein you've made to believe today, made me to believe that small for family is the norm, small family is good, and suddenly you want me to undo all of that and go ahead and make fourth baby. So that becomes a bit of a contradiction, uh, and it also leads me to have some kind of doubts on the state, which is making me dwindle from this side to the other side.
Professor, do you think state governments could not come up with a, you know, good plan, good infrastructure supporting system, in that kind of infrastructure support? When they come up with this incentive, it's very easy to announce an incentive, but in the society, in the collective society, we haven't still sorted out who will take care of the child, who will
Yes.
share that responsibility, who will share that load. How, as a society, see, there is a saying that, you know, a child, it needs a village to raise a child. So it's, we are heading to a big urbanization drive. So where do we stop, where do we start? It's a big puzzle.
Yeah. uh, I think you've made a point which perhaps has an answer embedded in it. The child is the future of the society, is the future of the nation in more than one way. And therefore, when we are trying to think in terms of increasing fertility, because we are seeing that the child is important for future generations, for future of the nation. Uh, where do we, what can be the center of collectivization becomes important. So to me, I think from the couple to the family to the society can be the structure in which we can embed this collectivization. And in order to do that, I think the state's role will begin right from the individual couple to the family to the society. And when I say this, what I'm trying to mean is what I've said earlier also, in terms of ensuring the infrastructure for rearing the child. And in this rearing the child, it doesn't only begin from education, probably it begins prior to that. You know, the health care that will be required, not only for the mother, but also for preparing the parents, preparing the couple for the parenthood. You know, preparing, therefore, the couple in such a way that they feel good in terms of the available employment, the incentives through employment that can be given, and then perhaps comes in the realm of laying down that infrastructure where the child can receive education. A child can do a good, live in a conducive housing, units. In all of this, perhaps when we get down to the level of community, for that matter, uh, and remember, if you're talking about the conventional socio-cultural norms in which most Asian, South Asian societies are, embedded, grandparents have a very strong role to play in the child rearing process, right? So, and therefore, that brings us to the other realm, which has a strong sociological, consideration by way of connecting the seniors with the juniors, meaning to say the three generations which will probably conventionally lived in housing units, and nuclearization of family has kind of broken that. Uh, can we go back to those by, goods and the bads brought in order to incentivize? Because one of the reasons where child rearing is becoming difficult, because of the nuclearization of the family, there's nobody to take care of the children. So will this, to my mind, bringing back this three generational households is likely to, uh, you know incentivize, quote unquote, some kind of, ease in rearing the child. And therefore, there is a different kind of role which is required to be seen, by way of how these senior citizens can be made use of, rather than, putting them in the old age homes or the homes which are affluent, and the builders are building for the elderly people to live with all the facilities possible. Just, I thought this point is important for us to bring us back to this original three generational housing units.
Fine, ma'am. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for all the information and your time for our viewers. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.